Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I am honored, so honored, to say a few words this morning about Judge James Buckley, a statesman, a patriot, a member of the World War II Greatest Generation, a senior Reagan State Department official, a D.C. Court of Appeals judge, a former member of this body, the U.S. Senate, a friend, and a shining example of a good, meaningful life lived in full. Now, Madam President, it's not very often that you get to say happy birthday to your 100-year-old mentor on the Senate floor. But today, I get to do that. It's one of my mentors. Judge Buckley has been a mentor and role model to me and so many other people who worked for him or worked with him over the past century. So, Judge, I hope you're watching. I hope some of your family members are watching. I want to wish you a happy 100th birthday from the United States Senate. We have this wonderful card here signed by dozens of U.S. senators, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, here on the Senate floor on your 100th birthday. Right now. We're going to deliver this to you soon. So, for those watching, who is this remarkable American statesman? Well, there's a wonderful Wall Street Journal op-ed in this morning's journal entitled Jim Buckley's Century of Service. I encourage all of my Senate colleagues to read it. He was from a very large and famous Connecticut family, many prominent brothers and sisters, 10 of them, quite large. His younger brother was the conservative intellectual William F. Buckley. But James Buckley, Judge Buckley, I like to call him, served his country in so many ways. As I noted, first, heroically as a World War II naval officer, service in many battles, including the Battle of Okinawa, which was the bloodiest battle in U.S. Navy history. He served as a U.S. Senator from New York, an Undersecretary of State in the Reagan administration, a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, right down the road, commonly referred to as the second most important court in the land. Think about that. That's service at the highest levels of 3 different branches of government, the only living American to do that, and the oldest member of the U.S. Senate, former member. And Madam President, in every position, Judge Buckley, throughout his life, brought integrity, a fierce intellect, and a compelling commitment to American exceptionalism. I've known Judge Buckley for 30 years. He is a man of faith, class, dignity, and humility. And he has never stopped serving his country. Even into his late 90s, he was still at work, writing a very well-received book on public policy just a few years ago called Saving Congress from Itself. Now, a few years back, I suggested that he present his book to us at one of our Republican lunches. And in so doing, I explained to the judge the way in which we have lunches here in the Senate. 3 times a week we get together. There's the Tuesday policy lunch. There's the Wednesday, what we call steering committee lunch. And then there's the Thursday lunch more informal, hosted by a member of our conference who can brag a little bit about their state and feed us great food from their state. So I suggested to the judge, come by the Wednesday steering committee lunch and share with us your new book. And I noted that, you may know, Judge, the steering committee was initially set up a long time ago by a group of more conservative senators, but is now pretty much attended by all Republican senators for lunch. Was he familiar with the steering committee? I asked the judge. In typical James Buckley, humble fashion, he said quietly, "Well, Dan, yes, I believe I was one of the co-founders of the steering committee." Of course you were, Judge. Of course you were. Well, anyways, we all had a great, very memorable lunch here in the Senate with Jim Buckley, where just in an hour, so many of my colleagues learned so much from him, which is what he's been doing his whole life. Now, Madam President, I got to know Judge Buckley when I caught a lucky break 30 years ago and was hired by him as his fourth law clerk, kind of a law clerk intern, when he was a D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals judge right down the road, and I was in my final year at Georgetown Law School. This was an incredible experience for me. As most know, and I already mentioned, the D.C. Circuit is considered the second most important court in the country, and of course is known as a feeder court into the U.S. Supreme Court for law clerks, but particularly for judges. Just look at all the former D.C. Circuit judges who went on to be Supreme Court justices: Berger, Scalia, Ginsburg, Thomas, Roberts, Kavanaugh, Jackson. So as a Georgetown law student, this internship was a very exciting opportunity for me. And I saw up close in Judge Buckley an example of principled jurisprudence that was anchored in the text of federal statutes and the Constitution, that recognized and emphasized the limits on federal judiciary and agency powers, and that understood the importance of federalism and the separation of powers in our constitutional system of ordered liberty. These were lifelong lessons for me, and I continued to use them daily right here in the U.S. Senate. Now, I enjoyed this job so much and was learning so much that I pretty much quit going to many of my law school classes. For the young people watching, especially law students, don't do that. That was a dumb idea. My very low grade in my evidence class was evidence of this. Now, Judge Buckley back then tolerated me in his chambers 30 years ago, but he really developed a special bond with my then girlfriend, Julie, who is now my wife of over 28 years. Julie and the judge had a small world connection concerning the great state of Alaska that was quite remarkable. In 1971, there was a very important bill being debated right here in the U.S. Senate called the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, what we call ANCSA. That bill became the world's largest land settlement for indigenous people ever, anywhere in the world. Right here in America, 44 million acres of federal land went to the native people of Alaska. And Jim Buckley, then a first-term U.S. Senator, in his first year, became a big supporter of Native rights in Alaska. Curious, interesting. What was going on there? Well, he was a conservative Republican and believed in property rights, in ownership, in free enterprise, and fee simple lands for the Native people, which is what ANCSA was all about. Much different than the lower 48, where the system of reservations and land held in trust by the federal government does not work well. Madam President, there was something else going on there. The Alaska Native leaders went to Washington in force to lobby different senators. And Senator Buckley was lobbied by a beautiful 36-year-old, brilliant Alaska Native leader named Mary Jane Fate, who just so happened to be my wife's, then my girlfriend's, mom. So the judge and my girlfriend Julie figured that out, put two and two together, that her mom was one of the big reasons in terms of lobbying that he got interested in the ANCSA legislation and was a strong supporter of that. Of course, that cemented their relationship and our relationship, and Julie and I and the judge have been great friends ever since, and I do want to thank him again on behalf of the people of Alaska for being such a strong supporter of that legislation, which literally changed the history trajectory of our state for the better 51 years ago. Now, Mr. President, a few years ago, I was asked by the outstanding organization, the Fund for American Studies, to give an address about honorable leadership. Honorable leadership. And I made my entire speech about the life and example of James Buckley. Honorable leadership and upholding the highest values of ethical service, which is what the life of Judge Buckley epitomizes, is not always easy. For example, as a U.S. Senator, Judge Buckley was one of the first members of the Senate Republican caucus to call on President Nixon to resign in the wake of the Watergate scandal. That certainly was not easy. He was also an early Republican leader on issues of environmental stewardship and responsible common sense conservationism in the spirit of Republican President Teddy Roosevelt that has the support from local communities. He co-sponsored legislation that created the Gateway National Recreation Area, which stretches along the northeast Atlantic coast from New York to New Jersey and is home to one of the most significant bird sanctuaries in the northeast part of the United States. And as an avid birder himself, I'm sure that this is one of the many proud aspects of the judge's important legacy to New York and to the rest of the country. But Mr. President, I think without a doubt, the most important legacy Jim Buckley has left all of us in the past 100 years has been his commitment to freedom and American liberty in both words and deeds. He fought for American freedom in the Pacific and World War II. Like so many from his greatest generation, he literally saved the world from tyranny. And he spoke eloquently of American freedom throughout his life. In another one of his books, titled If Men Were Angels, he wrote the following: I believe that in the last analysis, the most important thing in social and political life is freedom. And I believe that it is because of the safeguards written into the Constitution and the character of the American people that we have enjoyed freedom in such great measure more than any other country. Mr. President, this great American patriot has left his mark on the American soul, in American history, and American heritage at the highest levels of our federal government in all three branches of service. Thank you for your exceptional service to our great nation, Judge Buckley. All of the U.S. Senate and all of America wish you a happy and healthy 100th birthday. Mr. President, I yield the floor.